Uh, Tonight, or this morning, I should say, I'm going to talk about my aunts and uncles. There, there was quite a few on my dad's side. He came from a family of 13. Uh, their names were as follows, and I think this is the order of which which they were in the family. I know my Auntie Celia was the oldest. She had three children: Donald, Joe, and Marlene. Their last name was DeFilippis. Uh, the, when she died, the two boys lived with their dad, and Marlene, at that time was a little girl, I think at 3 or 4 years old. Well, she went to live with my grandma and Auntie Bessie. And my Auntie Bessie was the second in line. After Auntie Bessie came my dad. So after that came Bill, which is my dad. And then I think that the twins were born. The twins were Millie and Jimmy. And they died very young. I think they were less than a year old. There was some sort of influenza plague that at that time that babies got, and they got it and died. Then was my Uncle Charlie. My Uncle Charlie was my godfather. He was next in line. They had no children, and he drank a lot. He was quite a drinker, but he was also lucky. He won the lottery in Chicago twice, and he was quite a wealthy guy. And I thought, geez, I'm his godson. I'm going to get some money when he passes. Well, he ends up getting married to this gal, and then he passed away, and she got all the money. But anyway, that's the story. He and my dad used to go to Florida a lot when they both retired, and they had a good time. Uncle Charlie liked my dad, and I think vice versa. My dad liked Uncle Charlie. Then I think Blanche came, but I'm not too sure on the next. But Blanche, she had no children and was very wealthy also. And the only problem is that when she died, her husband was in the hospital on his deathbed, and she died first. She died. She had an episode with. I forget what it was now, but anyway, she passed away ahead of him. So all the money that they had went to his side of the family, and he had just one nephew, and which he left all his money to. And he turned around and sent every one of the cousins, which was I won $100. I didn't even want to cash the $100. But I said, "Oh, what the heck? Let's just cash it." So we cashed it. So that was my big inheritance from my Aunt Blanche. Then my Uncle Ray, I think he had two kids. I can't remember, Ray Jr. and another one. Then Gladys. I don't remember how many kids Gladys had, and then Eleanor, and I don't think Eleanor had one kid, my cousin, and I can't remember his name now. But anyway, shoot. Well, anyway, I can't remember his name. And then Art came. Art was one of my dad's younger brothers, and the only thing I can remember about him is in high school he was a boxer, and I remember them kidding around with him as being a fighter, and he was losing his hair. They always. My Uncle Art was always the fighter who was going bald, and of course, the other brothers would always tease him about that. Then my Uncle Bob, he died with kidney problems. This was before they had these kidney machines and such. And he had his wife was Vivian, and I think she's still alive somewhere. She's got to be pretty old. And they had a son. I think the son was David. It was a David. It was another David Simek. I think that was my Uncle Bob's son. And then there was my Uncle John, and he was the youngest. Bob and he were both in World War II. Bob was in the Army, building bridges, and this is where he's contracted some sort of disease of a kidney disease or something. I don't know. My aunts always blamed it on the war. And then John was in the Navy, and he's aboard ship somewhere. I can't remember. But these were my dad's brothers and sisters, his siblings, and these are what I can remember. The thing I can recall is that my grandmother would, on Sunday, would be the time for the family, and she would get up and go. I remember going to early mass on Sunday, 6 o'clock, and then start cooking, and then anybody who came over Sunday, she fed. So a lot of it was always the whole family would always be at Grandma's on Sunday afternoons. Well, this is before television and all that, and they'd all get together, and the uncles and some of the aunts would play penny ante poker, and they'd sit around and talk, and it was just her whole family. And my grandmother's Simek really liked that. She'd have all her kids around at that time. My grandfather was dead. He died at I think I was around 8 or 9 years old when he passed. And that's kind of my dad's side. They had all different kind of good. They had a good relationship with all. He had a good relationship with all his brothers and sisters. And they were all. It was a really a neat family. With 13 kids. Well, actually 11 living. Then on my dad's side, let's get back to my on my dad's side. There was a lot of cousins that I can't remember all their names, and I was kind of one of the older cousins, and then they had a bunch of there's a bunch of young cousins that my sister probably are more aware of than I am. I remember, like I say, the older ones like Donald DePhillips and Joe, but I can't remember all my other cousins. But I know I had a whole bunch. Then on my mom's side, my grandfather was married twice. His first wife died, and he had 2 children. I think 2, but he could have had 3, but I think it was 2. One was George, and the other one was Beatrice. George and Beatrice, when my grandpa married his second wife, they didn't get along with my grandma, the second wife. It was it's always the stepmother type thing. So I don't. I think Beatrice went to live with one of the sisters of my of my grandpa's first wife's sister. Beatrice went to live with him, and George, I think, went to live with the grandparents of my grandpa's first wife. I think that's how it went. And then after that, those two, which my grandfather, I think, bought each of those, George and Beatrice, their own homes at one time, or their or got them set up to have houses at that time. Bought them. Then, of course, he married my grandmother, who was his second wife, and she was one of those male brides. So she came along, and then she had my mother was Sylvia, was the oldest. Then my Auntie Marie, then my Auntie Helen, and then Ted, which was Uncle Ted, and then Lucille. They were the ones that came on one, two, three, four, 5 kids. And they had really my mom used to tell me they had a good life. Of course, this is when my dad had my grandpa had a lot of money, and he had a big car, and they used to take trips. And the longest trip they took was from Chicago to San Diego. He rented tents, and they had camping, all these camping things, and then he would take off and drive so many miles, and then put up the tent and stay there for a while and keep going. And she says it was really an interesting trip. They saw a lot of things. They saw the Grand Canyon and all the parts all the way down to San Diego. And the reason he went to San Diego, he had some relatives that live in San Diego, and I don't know who they are. I was trying to ask my sister if she knew, and the only thing she knows is that one of them was a contractor, some sort of, cement contractor. So I can't remember. I can't remember all that. But these are the aunts and uncles that I do remember. They all had kids, and but most of the kids were younger than I, and my sister probably knew more about them than I did. So that's a little something about my aunts and uncles, and I'm running out of things to talk about, things to do. But if I think about anything else that comes to me and that I haven't said, I'll record it, and you guys can listen to it or do what you want with it. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to sign off now.